Cops of Reddit, what's the most bullshit sounding excuse you got that actually turned out to be true?
My dad is an officer and he pulled someone over for speeding and running a red light, and they said their breast implant burst. He called emergency medical services to rush them to the hospital, and turned out it did, and it's actually very dangerous if they leak.
Do you know why I pulled you over?
My boob exploded.
One of the few occasions where, calm your tits, could be taken literally.
Alright ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm your tits.
Former park ranger. First week on the job, we pull up and see a couple of kids smoking in their car with the windows down. The city has an ordinance against smoking on park property, but it is too petty to give them a ticket. We approach the car and they are visibly nervous. My field training officer, or FTO for short, looks through the windows and sees a couple of beer cans in the car. Bingo. We get them out and start running their info. They are all underage but old enough to smoke cigarettes. My FTO asks them where the beer came from. The driver says,
"I recycle."
My FTO laughs and begins to search the car. I'm finishing up running their info, and these guys are being really respectful. My FTO finishes searching the cab and goes to open the trunk. All of a sudden I hear him bust out laughing. He is laughing so hard he can barely breathe. He waves me over to look at the trunk of the car and it is leveled with crushed cans and bottles. My FTO said that.
I have heard that excuse for 20 years, and this is the first time it was true.
He walked up, uncuffed the driver and let him go.
One night I'm out working, and as I go down the street, fairly nice middle class area surrounded by some high crime neighborhoods, around midnight I see a dude on a bike, no lights on, pulling a lawnmower behind him on a rope. I immediately flip a 180 and light him up, recognize the guy as a local homeless dude with some prior burglary/theft arrests. I walk up and just open with,
"Dude, come on."
The guy holds his hands out and swears he didn't steal the lawnmower, claims someone just gave it to him. I ask who, and he doesn't know a name, so I demand he tell me where to find said lawnmower owner. The directions he gave were literally,
"Go that way a bit, then right at a stop sign, and take one of those side streets that way. It's about halfway down a street, at a house that has a pickup and a car in the driveway."
By this point backup had arrived, so I leave him in the presence of backup, and drive off in search of his mythical donor of lawn equipment. I made a decent guess as to the first turn, then flipped a mental coin as to which of the next 3 side streets he would have gone down. I pick the second of the 3 streets, and start down it. Every other house has a truck and car combo. There must have been a dozen houses that matched the description. Halfway down, I see an average looking house and go,
"Hey, I'll try this one."
After all, it's midnight and this is a wild goose chase. Go up, I ring the doorbell. Middle-aged dude comes to the door.
"Hello sir, have you been giving away lawnmowers to random sketchy homeless guys at midnight today?"
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have.
The homeowner goes on to complain to me that his wife was upset at his continual inability to get the mower running, and had ordered him with some severity to remove the mower from the house or face the consequences. He pushed it to the curb right as the homeless guy rode by, and the latter had asked and received his permission to take it. I drove back in shock and amazement. I apologized to homeless guy, and sent him on his way. A few months later we ran into each other at a nearby gas station, and he told me it turned out just to need a new spark plug, and that he had gotten it running again, before going on to sell it for $150 to someone. My first ever real call was for a flasher at the local park. When I got there and finally found him, it was a mentally impaired young man, no older than 16 or 17, who had a pair of headphones on and a full Pooh Bear. I said,
"Hey man, come here, what the hell is going on? You know you have to keep your pants on especially at the park."
He goes on to tell me,
"I had this bad itching down my pants, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I had to rip my pants off and was running home to get help."
I said,
"Come on. You couldn't make it home first?"
He said,
"No, I had ants in my pants."
As sure as shit, according to more than one witness's account, he had been sitting in a sandbox playing at the park and accidentally sat on a nest of red ants that had crawled up his pant leg.
Not a cop, I am an attorney. I had a client who agreed to cooperate in a criminal matter. He was charged in a drive-by shooting. As part of the cooperation he had to divulge where his gun came from. He told the prosecutor that,
"I found it in a tree."
The prosecutor got angry at the response. He began to lambaste my client, when the detective said,
"Wait a minute. I had a case where the shooter claimed to have hidden his gun in a tree, but it wasn't there when we went to get it."
He asked my client where the tree was located, the same tree. I was as surprised as the prosecutor that he had told the truth. Not really an excuse, but shocked the shit out of me. I've always been told a diabetic with high blood sugar acts the same as someone who is drunk. I get a call for a car all over the road, hitting trash cans on the side of the road and whatnot. We stop the car and get the driver out. He's slurring his speech like no other, can't maintain his balance to save his life, fails all the sobriety tests, but blew zeros on the breath test. He denied drinking, and swears up and down he didn't do any drugs, never mentions the diabetes. We're all scratching our heads and I remember the blood sugar thing, call medical to our location and sure as shit, his blood sugar was 550, and he finally remembers that he hadn't taken insulin in 8 hours.
Not the cop in this story, but someone crashed into a tree on their way to work, and most people have an excuse as to why they weren't at fault when they crash. In this particular case, the woman said,
An L flew into my car and I swerved off the road into a tree.
Anyway, said cop gets into the car to move it for the tow truck, and sure enough an owl flies from the back seat past the officer's face and out the front window, surprises the cop, scared the shit out of him. I imagine the owl was included in the diagram of the accident report.
Was doing a tour as military police, not my normal job, but that's a whole other story, and we got called on a domestic disturbance. At the house, there is this huge corn-fed guy, about 6'4" and 275, and a petite Asian girl, about 4'10" and 95 pounds soaking wet. The whole house was in disarray, and the call had come because of yelling heard by the neighbors. She was crying and talking in an Asian language that none of us understood.
誰がベーコンを呼んだ?誰がベーコンを呼んだ?
And she kept gesturing toward her huge husband. He wasn't talking. We wrap him up, take him to the station, and are trying to interview him. But he's not saying much. We intend to charge him with domestic assault. We notice somewhere along the way that he has horrible welts all along the backs of his hands and along his forearms. It took a lot of prying. But we finally got out of him that his wife would beat him with wire coat hangers when she was mad, and apparently that was pretty often. He was too embarrassed to admit to anybody that he was being abused by his wife, who was less than a third of his size. We finally got it straightened out, turned her over to the local police, and barred her from base. Hopefully the guy got the help he needed.
I always feel for guys in situations like this because people always assume that they are the abusers and not the other way around. Makes you really wonder how many men go silent about their abuse because they're afraid to be arrested themselves or embarrassed. For the record, I'm aware many women also have fear that prevents them from reporting abuse, but we have to admit that a lot of places don't do justice to men who are victims of sexual assault or domestic violence. Not a cop, but I did get stopped by one for eating a taco. I worked at a community college in Los Angeles that had a high school right next to it. Well, there was a lot of drugs sold through the fence at the high school, so there was always cops driving up and down the street between the schools. Couldn't get a parking pass since I just worked at the school, so I always parked on that street. Hit up Taco Bell for lunch and was sitting in my car eating my double-decker tacos, when a cop drove past. Next thing I know he's flipping a U-turn and heading right for me. He slides to a drive-through window to the driver window and yells at.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
Stunned, I just said, eating my lunch. Well, he isn't buying it and says I'm hiding something. I just hold up my taco and looked so confused. He burst out laughing and peeled out. Saw him a few times after that and he always waved and had the biggest grin on his face. I'm running booking one night, a guy gets brought in, for processing a truly stupendous amount of drugs. I'm talking like 2 Rubbermaid totes full of shrooms, a huge bag of weed, and enough heroin to overdose half the county. Well, he says,
I'm a DEA informant, and they told me to make the drop, so they could be there and raid the crap out of everybody, and let me go for helping.
Ah, right. Face left please. Guy is like,
I'm telling you dude, they're gonna be super pissed that you country retards up their bust.
whatever, get in the holding cell and shut up. About 3 hours later 3 guys show up, DEA agents. They're super pissed that our deputies effed up their bust. I go back to the holding cell to let the guy out, and he's just like,
They're super pissed, huh?
yeah.
Told you so.
I had a similar call to this. One night, I was on patrol running traffic, and ran a tag through the state's DMV system. Tag comes back immediately with a DHS warning, tone and everything, alerting that the driver was on the terrorist watch list and advised not to make contact with the driver under any circumstances. I thought, maybe I'd run the wrong plate, so I tried it again. Sometimes the tags are hard to read and things show up wrong. The tag returned again as the driver being on the no contact list. I was about to advise dispatch that of the situation, when they raised me on the radio, saying someone from DHS had called about me running the plate twice and demanded that I not make contact with the vehicle. Needless to say, I left him alone, but it was crazy spooky how fast they called after I'd run the plate. Serious watchdogs.
Policing gets spooky when it gets up to the federal level.
This guy is on our radar, we know about him. Do not talk to him, do not ask questions, just thank us and go home and hug your wife.
Not a cop, but I had a run-in with one that was really funny once. When I was 18, I was on a double date with a friend, and we stepped out of a restaurant to smoke. A cop came up and started harassing us, telling us there had been break-ins into cars in the area. Eventually, he said he needed to pat us down, and he pulled a brown paper bag out of my friend's pocket. He got a smug look on his face and asked,
"So, what's in here, huh?"
My friend said,
The Emancipation Proclamation.
with a completely straight face. The cop opened the bag, pulled out a small booklet, got embarrassed, and let us go. My friend had been to the Lincoln Museum earlier that day, and did actually have a small copy of the Emancipation Proclamation in his pocket.
I was driving with my fiancé and we went through a roadblock where they checked registration and shit, and we get to the cops and they ask for our registration. I'm sitting in the passenger seat, so I open up the glove box and right there is a clear, unmarked baggie filled to the brim with catnip. I completely forgot it was there and just froze, wide-eyed. I turned to look at the cop shining his light through my open window and he's frozen too, just staring at the baggie with this look on his face like,
Really?
I just started immediately professing, "Oh my god. I swear to God this is catnip, you can take it and smell it or test it or whatever, like, I swear." And at this point, it's just so ridiculous that I start cracking up, and the cop takes it and reasonably deduces I'm telling the truth, and he starts laughing and calls his partner over, and tells her what happened and they both just cackled away for a minute and sent us on our way.
Cat weed, good thing they weren't cat cops.
You mean law enforcement? One of the funnier ones that I remember, we got a call for a kid. He was 18 and a gang member, brandishing a firearm. He had pulled up his shirt pretending to brandish a firearm to intimidate somebody. The person calling only saw a holster. After we got there, he kept telling us it wasn't a gun but a dildo. We took him down at gunpoint and he was right. He was walking around with a holstered, black dildo. Why? Because he could. Ha ha.
Not a cop, but my dad rolls cigars. He uses this white powder called vegetable gum to seal the wrapper. You mix it with some water and it gets sticky and clear. In powder form, it looks similar to cocaine. My dad had a massive bag on him after a rolling event one night, and got pulled over for a traffic violation. They saw the bag of powder laying in a box and asked what it was, and my dad told them. I guess they didn't believe him because they called back up. They had my dad cuffed while they tested it, and sure enough it came back as not cocaine. They let him go, but it still cracks me up hearing the story.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out my other videos. Also, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and ring the notification bell.